The topic of our gathering tonight is Laudato Si, and this changes everything. An encyclical is a letter written from the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, to his brother bishops. In the very first part of this document, Pope Francis addressed it as, "I would like to address every person living on this planet. In this encyclical, I would like to enter into dialogue with all people about our common home." So it's a profound document because it was written to all people. It wasn't written by a bishop to other bishops. It was also very profound because if you have read it, it's actually easy to read. Laudato Si, as most of you know, I hope, is the title of Pope's encyclical that came out a couple months ago. This Changes Everything is the title of a book written by Naomi Klein. I had the pleasure of meeting Naomi in Rome a couple months ago. She and I were at the same meetings in Rome. She was a speaker at it, and they introduced her as a radical Jewish feminist. And so she wrote an article called "The Radical Jewish Feminist at the Vatican." By inviting her to speak at the Vatican and be there, meet the Pope, it certainly changed everything in terms of the Catholic Church, because 5-6 years ago, somebody like that would have never, ever been invited to come to Rome and be part of meetings and gatherings. That kind of shows you of where we are as a Catholic faith. I believe Laudato Si is perhaps the most important document that's been written in our lifetime. It challenges us to rethink who we are in relation to all creation, but it also gives us hope for a shared future. Pope Francis wastes no time in writing about what is the problem, when in the second paragraph he states, "The sister now cries out to us because of the harm we have inflicted on her by our irresponsible use and abuse of the good which God has endowed us. We have come to see ourselves as her lords and masters, entitled to plunder her at will." Now just think about that statement for a second, and think about the first two words in that statement, this sister. He's talking about this sister, our sister, Mother Earth. So this is the first time the Pope has referred to the environment in that way. God sees the whole earth, our common home. This encyclical also talks about how we're all connected. And again, right in the beginning, in paragraph 10, Pope Francis comments on, and he's commenting on St. Francis, who said, he talks about St. Francis and he says he shows us just how inseparable the bond is between concern for nature, justice for the poor, commitment to society, and interior peace. So right at the beginning of this encyclical, Pope Francis connects all of our issues and connects all of us as human beings and as all of creation. The encyclical Laudato Si stands for Praise Be. That came right out of a hymn that St. Francis of Assisi wrote, in which he talks about brother sun and sister moon, and praise be all creation. In the beginning was only being, one without a second. Out of himself he brought forth the cosmos and entered into everything in it. There is nothing that does not come from him. Of everything, he is the inmost self. Now, for Christians, it could come right out of the Gospels, or it could come out of the Torah, or the Quran, but it actually comes from Sanskrit. And so you can see that all of our spiritual teachings talk about all of us as being one, part of the one. The Quran says a great deal about the environment. It says that we should not create disorder or pollution. So way back when the Quran was being written, they were talking about pollution and not creating pollution, especially in regards to humanity. Not just this generation. We should not use creation for us to use to our heart's content. Only humans need the guidance of a scripture, as only human species has free will. All other species do their God-given task automatically. If you read the Quran, there are over 700 verses that talk about caring for creation, caring for God's beautiful, beautiful, wondrous creation. We're at that point where we have to do something. Pope Francis says to us, he said, "Many things have to change course, but it is we human beings above all who need to change." We're the ones that have to change. And what is Pope Francis talking about when he says we need to change? Bonaventure again told us that how we choose and what we choose makes a difference. First, by what we become by our choices, and second, by what the world becomes. So Pope Francis called for a bold cultural revolution. Kind of an interesting thing for a pope to call for is a revolution. But he called for it several times. He called for us to move forward in a bold cultural revolution, to rise up in a revolution not of guns, but a revolution of spirit, to stop living in a world where we are all separate and come to a world of interbeing, a world where we are part of creation, not separate from creation. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's a prayer that we all pray. That's the most frequently prayed prayer for Christians. Do any of us ever actually stop to think of what those words mean? Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Do we actually believe that in heaven there's going to be people living in garbage dumps and other people living in mansions? Do we believe that in heaven it's going to be okay to pump water and destroy the water, pollute the water, and destroy the earth by splitting rocks apart so we can get gas? Do we think that's going to happen in heaven? And if we don't think it's going to happen in heaven, why would we think it's okay for it to happen on earth? I have a friend, Brian McLaren, and another friend, Richard Rohr, who often they both say, they ask the question, do you think God came, not God, Jesus came, or maybe God, came with a building plan or an evacuation plan? Because most of our Christian theology today is based on an evacuation plan. We're going to go someplace else. Most of the writings in the Gospels are based on building the kingdom of heaven here. Hope would have us recognize that there's always a way out, that we can always redirect our steps, that we can always do something to solve our problem. And more importantly, all it takes is one good person to restore hope. We started out talking about Laudato Si, this changes everything. What has to change, as Pope Francis says, is us. And it's not just changing a light bulb or changing, how we drive. We have to change. We have to transform. We have to be called what we're called to do. We have to find a way to really become one with all of creation. All of these issues that we work on, climate, immigration, they're all the same issue. They're just symptoms of the greater issue. And that is, are we in right relationship with God, however we refer to God, however we celebrate God, and are we in right relationship with all that God creates? To be transformed, like Pope Francis says, we have to start being in right relationship with all of creation. We have to be part of creation, not separate from creation. And then everything will change. Thank you so very, very much. And I'll introduce the panelists, and it sounds like a joke too, but we have an Episcopalian priest, a Baptist minister, and a rabbi. And somewhere in there we can make a joke out of it. But our first panelist is Reverend Stephanie Johnson. Next to Stephanie is Rabbi Hazan Shaul. And finally, next to him, we have the Reverend Tom Carr. So why don't we start with Stephanie?
So the Episcopal Church has been doing this work for a long time. Environmental ministries. We started in the 70s, right after the first Earth Day. And we've done various actions and groups and committees and workshops and all of these things trying to engage people in various ways. And I was involved in a recent campaign that we started in New England, which was turn off the lights for God's sake.
Nice.
Now, as Patrick said earlier, turning off the lights does not change things, but it invites us into a deeper relationship to what we do and how our individual actions can constantly be reframed and rethought of in terms of hope and possibility. Turning off the water. I often turn the water on, and as it runs, I thank God for that water. Just these moments of recognition, because this can be overwhelming. This can be really scary. I mean, Patrick and Tom and I, we've been doing this all over New England, and people walk away in tears. Patrick and I do a workshop on grief, and there's a lot of grief associated with climate change. And so when we find hope in community, we find hope and gratitude in small actions. We're people of ritual. We're people of prayer. It doesn't necessarily change. It might not change. It can change the world, but it transforms our hearts. Prayer and ritual and gratitude. Our House of Bishops, of which there are 150 bishops, issued their own equivalent of a pastoral teaching, our own encyclical, if you will, that invited people to call out for creation. And that was issued 4 years ago, and it's an invitation, not unlike the Pope's encyclical, to say, please, people of God, move forward, be transformed by creation, be transformed by God, and act in ways for all of creation. And so we've been, as an Episcopal priest, I'm traveling all over the country inviting people to reimagine a relationship, not only to our church, the Episcopal Church, but also to God and God's creation. I have other things to say, but I'm going to pass the mic on. But thank you, Patrick, for organizing this, and Janine and Jim for pulling this together. I'm grateful. And Marcy? Go ahead. Oh, sorry. But I'm grateful to be here, and I'm happy to talk about lots of other things. Like I said, we do this all the time, so we kind of know each other. But thank you.
Well, I also want to thank Patrick for the invitation of being here this evening. Thank you, sir. And this Pope Francis is really rocking. And I'm firmly Jewish, but I was starting to feel, feeling it, that whole Catholic thing. And I was very, very gratified to hear that there is a fourth order of the Franciscans, and that maybe I could get part of the action and maintain my Jewish identity. So I want to just offer what I feel I could offer best, which is bringing back Scripture to its original language. Exodus 23:10 through 11. V'shesh shanim tizra et artzecha v'asafta et tevuata v'ashvi'i tishmatena unetashta v'achlu evyonei amecha. So 6 years you shall sow the land and gather in the increase thereof, but on the 7th year thou shalt let it rest and lay fallow, that the poor of thy people may eat. So, again, built into the Torah, the biblical idea is this idea of the Shabbat, not only the Sabbath for men, but the Sabbath for the land. The land gets a break too. And so what this is really talking about, and what somehow has been lost, is the Gaia consciousness, the consciousness that the earth is alive, it has its rights, and it has its disposition, and when the earth is not feeling very well, it might do some things that we wouldn't like very much. When we begin to relate to the earth as a living entity, as a sister, as Pope Francis had stated, we begin to come to our healing. But we're living in a sociopathic world. And we need to inculcate, we need to preach, go out there, break down these walls and get out there and tell people about tzedakah, tell people about, this beautiful planet of ours. And so I am very happy to be here to talk about the Laudato Si and talk about this great Pope that is totally rocking the world. And I just might join that fourth order of the Franciscans.
Patrick, when I was listening to you, I didn't hear any Baptists in that fourth order. Oh, there are some Baptists. Yeah, it's really wonderful to be here, and just to follow up on what you were just talking about. To me, and to the Pope and leaders, religious leaders all over the world, this is a moral and ethical and spiritual matter. This is a matter of the heart. This is really a matter of the heart. The thing I love so much about this encyclical is that I couldn't even stop turning the pages. It is a beautiful document. It's a beautiful document because it speaks right to the individual and the corporate and our corporate hearts. He talks about integral ecology. In 1969, my denomination, American Baptist, kind of coined a term, eco-justice. It means the interconnection between ecology and human justice. That's exactly what the Pope was getting at. All the major religion in America have statements on climate change. And these statements all accept the science, it's reality. That's what religion's supposed to do. I think also one of the things that Patrick said, this isn't a New Age thing. If you really want to go back and read some of St. Basil the Great's prayers and sayings from the 4th century. He's even got Hildegard and St. Francis, beat on that. But it has been part of our tradition. This interconnectedness with all life and all existence. I just want to say one thing. The Interreligious Eco-Justice Network was founded 15 years ago. We have about 350 congregations, mostly churches, synagogues, some mosques, some Buddhists and Hindus and Baha'i and different faiths. And we've been doing a lot of things, particularly on climate change and toxins. There's one more of the big three is species extinction. These are three major macro issues that we need that are getting at now. I'll stop.
Great. So thank our panelists.